So there's really only a few ways to kind of get the justice you need. One is through the courts, but then that has to be enforced by some sort of body. It might be the police, it might be financial institutions. Another way is through legislation, and then that also would have to be enforced by changing the way that the practices are, and if people violate your legislative changes, then you have to go to the courts. And another way is movements of people that then just kind of topple the courts or the state houses or the White House, you name it, because the people have kind of demanded it. And the best is when these things really work together. And it's called movement-based lawyering to some. And so, some people like to work in a bubble when they go to court. They want to just focus on, the rules of evidence, et cetera, and see maybe people protesting outside as a distraction that's going to maybe make the judge mad, or inflame the other side or something. But when you're talking about human rights and you're talking about discrimination, things like that, if you can't make the judge mad, you're probably in the wrong place. You really got to fire up the people on these issues, and you really got to win the larger narrative. And you really have to change the hearts and minds of the people. You got to change the culture. So going back to around 2011, Norris and I really saw this lawsuit that could happen around voting rights in Louisiana. And early on we had just some broad strokes. I'd done some research, he had done some research, even long before I'd done some research that applied to me right now when I moved to Louisiana and couldn't vote. And I was coming off, in 2006, wrote a constitutional amendment in Rhode Island while I was on parole, and organized and fought for the right to vote up there by changing the Constitution. And this is my tattoo on that. It was question 2, and we became the first state to ever re-enfranchise people through the popular ballot. And so with that kind of history, I wasn't just going to come to Louisiana and be like, oh, I can't vote. You can't say to a hungry person in the desert, it's a long way to get some food. They're going to walk because they don't have a choice. And they're going to go and they're going to look for that food. And so we had no choice but to keep moving forward. And it just so happened that Professor Bill Quigley, lawyer of the people at Loyola Law School, was going on sabbatical. So it's word to the wise, like catch these icons when they go on sabbatical, because you never know what you can get out of them, in the movement. And so we did a pitch to a lot of these local civil rights lawyers and friends of Vote, friends of Norris, rising friends of myself, and it was a pitch from Norris and Bill, and nobody could say no to Norris and Bill. And so we gathered people up in a room. There's probably about 30 in the beginning, and I laid out the research I had done and some ideas about claims and angles, and people were super into it. And so we ended up drafting up a complaint and filed it, but we knew that we weren't just going to file it. And we filed it on the same day that July 3rd, 2016, and we had a rally at City Hall and said, "This is your 4th of July, not mine," the famous words of Frederick Douglass.